Hello there, August 27th at 11:08 a.m. And I am outside at the house in Kauai, causing and allowing my faith to rise um, by worshiping and listening to a lot of worship songs that are just real about the struggle of being in faith. and hitting times and moments of intense unbelief. Um, I have found myself in that place, and it's been shocking. Um, I don't know why it's that way. Nothing's happened to make it that way. I haven't sustained some big trauma or something. Nothing like that's happened. But still, I've felt about as flat as I can remember feeling. I can only remember feeling this way one time before, and that was many years ago when my spiritual father, Nathaniel Duffy, was still here, and we were having a Monday night meeting. And for some reason, everybody in the ministry hated me at that time. I hadn't done anything. Everybody was mad. Everybody was mad. Um, and I could feel it. No one had said anything, but I could feel it coming from all directions, and I didn't know why. And we were having this meeting, and Doc was in the middle of preaching a message about I don't even know what, and all of a sudden he just pivoted in the middle of the message and began just covering me and just pushing back people's negative thoughts and opinions and stuff that he could pick up in the room too. And he just, the only way I remember experiencing it is that it just felt like he just whipped out this giant cloak and just flung it out over me, and it just covered me. It was it was still attached to him, but it covered me, and it felt like everybody's angry, did this and retracted. But I remember in that moment that I felt all of my faith leave me, and I had never experienced that before, where I had an absence of faith. And it was by far one of the scariest moments of my life. Being in a place where you not only you don't want to believe, not wanting believe is one thing. Not being able to believe is something else altogether different. And being incapable of faith is terrifying. I have found. I found that out then, and I'm experiencing that now too. That being incapable of believing for good, or incapable of believing for something outside of you and bigger than you, being able to handle your problems and bring you out of your terrible situation, bring you out of what seems impossible to escape from. It's that's terrifying, to feel like you're all alone, and you know that all you have is you, and you don't have anything. And so, I've been allowing my faith to rise today by worshiping and being reminded of things. And I have to say that even though I was worshiping, my heart still wasn't moving so much. And then I recognized something. There was this low-key thought that was going on underneath all of my other thoughts. And it was, honestly, it was this word that Doc had given to me once. He said, there's these Christian songs that are out that's God never loses a battle. God never loses a battle. And he's like, that's not true. God loses battles all the time. He doesn't lose the war, but he loses battles all the time. People have their own agendas, and the Spirit of God won't, circumnavigate you and cross over your own will, because he gave us free will. And so he's like, God loses battles all the time. He doesn't lose the war, but he loses battles all the time because man has free will, and man chooses to go ways that are opposite of God. And so that thought, which makes perfect clarity, makes perfect sense when you hear it, had snuck in and lodged itself in a place that was unhelpful. And I only discovered that this morning after a solid week of battling this unbelief, if not longer. It's been maybe 10 days. It's been tough. Very tough to suddenly be in that place. And the subtle thought that had snuck in was that, God loses battles. And I'm waiting on him and relying on him to come through for me in some areas, and to, make sense of a life that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me right now, and I low-key was like, I don't believe he's going to be able to do it, because he loses battles all the time, and this could be one of those things that he loses. And that thought was going around and around and around and around in my subconscious until I caught it today. And I sat there and I thought about the thought, and I was like, yeah, that may be true, but when I look back over my life, he's never failed me. And I can't speak for anybody else, and I certainly can't speak for everybody else, but I can speak for me. And when I look back over my life, I can't think of a single time that he has failed me. I can't think of a single battle that he's lost for me. And so it started ripping this subconscious torpedo that was wreaking havoc to everything below the surface. It started causing that thing to surface and stop wreaking havoc on my vessel, my faith vessel. And, I'm just now taking the first couple of steps out of this pit that I found myself in. But I heard this song in the midst of all of this about being empty and feeling weak and feeling unqualified. I think it was a Chandler Moore. Chandler Moore is awesome. Tapped into a pipeline in the spirit and just bringing out goodies. The song went something like, when you're feeling the most empty and when you're feeling the most weak, it's the perfect place to be, because there's finally room for God to move in. And that's what we want. We want more availability for the Spirit of God to come in and do the things that we know that we cannot do. And, I've lived my life like that for some time now. But I don't know that you ever arrive. I've walked with the Lord for some time. I don't know that you ever arrive at a place where you don't need him and where you don't need his faith. And that's what he gave me that time with Nathaniel, with Doc. He thrust his cloak out over me and he gave me this faith, and I recognized it. And I went home later that night and I was like having this conversation with God about how, between me, you, and the light post, I had no faith, and you knew that, and you know that. And rather than berating me, and rather than giving me a hard time and giving me shit about not having faith, you just gave me yours. And that changed everything for me. And I'm experiencing that again. And I'm going to sum it up by saying this, couple of weeks ago, I started saying this thing that dropped on me in my spirit, to a couple of different people, and one of the last times I said it, I recognized that I was saying it for me too, and that was this: that the Spirit of God was saying that some of us had gotten very comfortable with the things that He's done for us in our lives, and that, no shade to Him and no shade to us, but that, there'd been some plateauing of our faith because, we were just kind of coasting someplace, Again, no shade, and it's not a conversation about good and bad and right and wrong and good and evil. It's not about any of that. It's just about coming to a place where you're just like, okay, yeah, God's done this great stuff for me, and it's cool, and I believe Him, and He's cool, and we good, And He's like, that's cool and all, but you don't really believe me to do the unbelievable, and you need to know that I can still do that, and I can still do that for you too. So I'm gonna need to show that to you. And I tossed this thing out cavalierly to a couple of people, at least 2 to 3 people, before I felt that boomerang come around and hit me too. And I feel it. I feel it in my bones. I feel it in my bones that God is in the market right now to show out in our lives in a way that He never has before, in the way that we've never seen Him do it before. And it's a full flex move. You feel me? Because He needs us to know that He still does the impossible. And so I would just say that if you're like me and you're experiencing a lot of upheaval and tumult, and you're experiencing a shit ton of weakness, and feeling very empty, and feeling very bereft, and finding your faith in the toilet, and not knowing how to rescue it, and none of the things that you normally do work, I would say to you that you're in the right place, and that God is setting you up to do the unbelievable in your life. And I would recommend spending time communing in nature, if possible. I would recommend getting in some ocean water if possible. I'd recommend getting a massage if possible. I'd recommend putting on some music or some meditation or something that, will calm you down. I recommend spending some time praying in the Spirit. I'd recommend worshiping. Did I say worshiping already? I recommend worshiping, because worship does a thing nothing else does. And I would recommend something else that my friend has recommended to me. Fun. Fun. Find something fun. Do something fun. Find something to laugh about. Find something to giggle about. Find something that tickles your funny bones, and your rib cage. Fun. And get out of your head. And ask God to do the thing that He's purposing in His heart to do. And to let you know what your part is, that you're ready, willing, able, and listening. And then be patient. And watch God show out in our lives. Good counsel, right? I'm taking it for me too. All right. I think that's it. Aloha from beautiful Kauai.